Long before you see their decomposing bodies, you can hear dry, tormented moans from their rotten throats and smell the decay on their putrid flesh. You've been running from them, but they need no rest, no sleep, and feel no pain. Pushed to your limits, you round a corner but find the way blocked. You're cornered, trapped, with the shambling undead closing in on you. Their hungry, dead eyes and drooling mouths are the last things you see as they descend upon you. And they slam you for 1d6 plus 1 bludgeoning damage. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and today we're going to be looking at the zombie as a threat in tabletop role-playing games, specifically using the one from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition as our case study. We're going to take a look at it, and I'm going to talk about how I designed a zombie in Tales from Elsewhere, and see if we can apply some of those lessons back into 5th edition and maybe come up with a zombie that's a little scarier, a little bit more evocative, maybe something that the players will have a more interesting time interacting with. There is a wide variety of zombie fiction out there and different interpretations of the zombie, but I think if we took them in aggregate, we'd find a few things that are pretty common with all of them. One is that they're hard to kill. You generally need to blow up their head or decapitate them or something like that. Two is that their bites spread the zombie infection in some way. They feed on the living, and it's from those bites that people can turn and increase their ranks. Those zombie apocalypses that are so popular are only possible because the zombie infection spreads. And three, that they are slow and easy to handle on their own, but in large groups are deadly. So let's take a look at the 5th edition zombie and compare those three features to what the stat block is in 5e. So the zombie has a lot of hit points, making it durable for such a low challenge rating enemy. That kind of replicates that it's hard to kill. It moves slowly with a reduced move speed, then that sounds good. And it has an undead fortitude feature that gives it a constitution saving throw whenever it would be destroyed to just stay at 1 hit point, with some caveats about critical hits and radiant damage. And then its means of attack is a minimal damage slam. So I've never really liked the stat block of the zombie in Dungeons & Dragons since 3rd edition and on, and that's because it's always been such a uninteractive and unevocative creature. It really has just some base durability that makes it time-consuming to kill. It has a chance to just not die, and its attacks are just a punch, basically, that does a small amount of damage. So if a character is killed by zombies, they're kind of just beaten to death. And there's very few zombie movies or zombie fiction that have that sort of structure. Really, the 5th edition zombie is no more than an undead construct. It's a robot, almost, that just walks up to things and punches them. So let's talk about the zombie I designed for Tales from Elsewhere's Clockworld setting, and see if we can learn some lessons from it and then apply it back into D&D. The key differences between the D&D zombie and the Tales from Elsewhere zombie are in its attack and how I've replicated its difficulty to kill. So the attack in Tales from Elsewhere zombie is a bite that leaves a festering wound, and this wound will bleed and be hard to treat, and spells a death sentence for a player if they aren't able to handle it quickly. If they succumb to it and die, they also rise as a zombie. That's because Tales from Elsewhere has an injury system with called shots on the body, and so a single bite from a zombie doesn't just do a small amount of damage, it leaves this wound that is, as you imagine from a zombie movie, that gets all infected and gross, and if you can't handle that, if you don't have some medicine, then that player could succumb to it and die. In Tales from Elsewhere, the way that I have replicated the zombie's inability to be killed easily is by leveraging the called shots and the injury system. So in order to kill a zombie in Tales from Elsewhere, you have to inflict a critical injury to the head. Perfectly in line with most people's perception of what a zombie is and how you should fight them, right? You gotta take your gun and shoot them in the head. Otherwise, tearing off their limbs, going for the torso, none of that is gonna stop the thing. I mean, you could slow it down by taking out its legs, but the only way to kill it is to brain it. From all of my playtesting in Tales from Elsewhere, I found that zombies in this form are way scary. They cause the players to actually fear getting in close with a group of them. They don't necessarily want to just rush into a group of even 3 to 4 zombies out of fear of being bitten. It makes them play a little bit more tactically and respect that zombie bite. Even if the zombie isn't very accurate and it's easy to shove them away, You get a few of them, and all it takes is one unlucky roll, and a zombie might snag a bite in the arm. And now your character's arm is gushing blood, and it's hard to stop the bleeding, and they could be dead very soon if they don't get help. So it's created much more of a horror feeling for the zombie, and one that I think is missing from a lot of tabletop games. Okay, let's see if we can take some of that design and bring it into D&D 5e. Now, we're not going to add a targeting system into D&D. That's a whole other structure that D&D doesn't really need. That would just bog the game down, and D&D already has fairly slow combat. So let's apply this specifically to Undead Fortitude, see if we can rewrite that, and the zombie's slam attack. Let me show you what I've written up here, and these aren't final drafts or anything official, but let me know what you think about this redesign of the zombie. First thing we're actually going to do is we're going to reduce the zombie's max hit points from 22 down to 14. Now, the reason for this is to make it so a zombie could be reduced from full hit points to 0 hit points in a single hit by more classes if they critical hit or use a resource. So this means something like a character using a greatsword, they can actually deal that much damage even without a critical hit that would take out the zombie in one hit, because I don't think a zombie should need multiple hits to necessarily kill. It's about getting a lucky hit. So by having 22 hit points on the zombie initially and having its undead fortitude, it makes the zombie kind of a slog to interact with. You kind of just chip it down and then hope that that last hit is enough so that it fails its saving throw. So we're going to reduce its max HP a little bit and make it so you can one-shot it on more classes in the game, especially on a critical hit. So let's try a rewrite of Undead Fortitude. I don't really like that the zombie is making a Constitution saving throw to not die. I think that's adding a needless step and calculation for both player and DM here, because every time a zombie would be reduced to 0 hit points, you have to calculate the Constitution saving throw, and then the zombie has to roll. So I think on a redesign, let's fold Undead Fortitude's mechanics into the player's attack. So the new Undead Fortitude would read, whenever the zombie takes damage that isn't radiant, if the damage is less than 10, the zombie ignores that damage. You'd total all of the damage for the single hit. So what does this mean? This means that only big hits actually hurt the zombie. The small wounds, a little stray arrow, a thrown knife, that just sticks into the body and doesn't really do anything, right? It doesn't feel like you're actually hurting it with those attacks because the zombie isn't hurt. Its undead fortitude means those little nicks and cuts just don't really matter. This makes it so the player is still looking for a big hit on their turn to take out the zombie, but it doesn't make it so it's an extra level of calculation. They're just looking for a big number. And we include the radiant aspect here because, classic D&D, the radiant damage should get through this. So, a single guiding bolt is enough to take out a zombie in one shot. That undead fortitude wouldn't matter. But it also means that players can chip away. One big hit could leave it at only a couple hit points, and then one radiant hit would take it out. So now let's talk about the zombie's slam attack. We're getting rid of it. It's boring. I don't like it. Zombies shouldn't slam. Zombies should bite. So we're going to give them a bite attack. It'll have the same plus to hit, but we're going to make it a d4 plus 1 rather than a d6 plus 1, because the zombie's bite itself shouldn't actually be very damaging. It shouldn't inflict a lot of hit point loss. Really, you should just be worried about the bite at all. In zombie movies, that initial bite isn't always such a grievous wound. Instead, it's that the zombie infection has got into the bite, right? And maybe they didn't even realize it and they look down and oh no, they've been bit. So we're going to make it a zombie bite, 1d4 plus 1 damage, nice and light. But if it inflicts damage to the player, they're given a festering wound. Now, maybe you want to make it so there's a saving throw for the players to avoid getting a festering wound when they're bit, but I think it's actually scarier if you don't make them roll, but maybe add in a DC 12 con save to avoid getting a festering wound initially, if the deadliness of this sounds too much. So a festering wound is a disease that prevents the character from regaining any hit points and makes them automatically fail death saving throws. Additionally, getting a long rest does not remove exhaustion levels. Instead, they gain 1 exhaustion level whenever they take a long rest. So this isn't immediately life-threatening to the player. It's not like they're going to bleed out and die. I mean, that's not the fiction of D&D. But a single zombie bite on a character now means they need to be more careful, because if they start going down, if they have 0 hit points, they're going to automatically fail death saving throws. This wound is now on them, and they need to play around that. Now, it's a disease, so using something like Remove Disease, a paladin could get rid of it. There'd be ways to handle that, but the players would need to play cautiously while having this affliction on them, and that's scary. And of course, if they die while they have a festering wound, they become a zombie as well. So what does the fight look like now with these new zombies in 5th edition? Because again, 5th edition is heroic fantasy, and we don't want to actually take that away. But we still want the players to maybe respect the zombie a little bit. Well, now that the zombie has a bite that is nasty, it means the melee players may not want to just run in and throw caution to the wind in order to fight the zombies. Maybe they want to be careful about fighting several of them at once, because the goal is to not get hit by the zombies. So maybe the sword and shield fighter runs into the front line where the zombies are and uses the dodge action this time, instead of just starting to swing their longsword. Maybe keeping the attention on them while the rogue and ranger set up to do big hits because they have fairly spiky damage. Or that gives the barbarian a moment to come in and do a reckless swing and add their brutal dice, maybe, that they get at later levels. It's giving the players some time to create a tactic here. And maybe they don't want to engage in melee at all. Maybe they want to stay back and try to lure the zombies into a convenient place to drop boulders on them, or use their ranged attacks and hope to get high enough damage. It's just going to force them to rethink how they approach, because too many D&D monsters are designed with that straight attrition in mind. And I think that's not exciting or scary or interesting when it comes to zombies. Zombies deserve better. So I have actually one more idea to add on here to the zombie that I thought of kind of late. So zombies having an opportunity attack where they punch you is lame. So I think zombies shouldn't be able to take any reactions except an opportunity attack where they grab you when you try to move away. So using 5.5's rules, a grab is a saving throw that you make when you're trying to get away. So it'd be maybe a DC 12 saving throw, and if you fail it, it's snagged your hair or part of your clothing, and now you're immobilized. So that could add an extra level of threat to the zombie, but because I haven't play tested this update, and I'm not sure if that actually makes the zombies too deadly based on their challenge rating, these updates already have maybe pushed the challenge rating up a scotch, so I don't want zombies to be too deadly. This is heroic fantasy after all, and we don't want it to be really inconvenient to fight them. But really, zombies shouldn't be reacting much at all anyway, so I'd even consider just having them have no reactions, or maybe this snag. So this zombie is very different, and I'd love to know the community's feedback on that. Let me know what you think, and if you are going to try this out, I'd really like to know how your players interact with it. Right? I'd love to see if the intended effect of the players respecting and fearing that zombie bite actually plays out decently in a more horror-themed Dungeons & Dragons game. So definitely keep me posted and let me know in the comments what you think, or if you've seen another tabletop role-playing game do zombies perfectly. I'd love to read more about that too. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.